In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the MultiCut tool. Now, once again, in Maya, there are a lot of different ways to access the same tool. To begin with, I'm going to start by making a cube and scale it up so that I have something to show you how this kind of works. Now, to find the MultiCut tool, the first place you can look is by coming up and making sure that the file menu is on the modeling menu. And then coming under Mesh Tools, I can select MultiCut. You can also do Control-Shift-X, which is the hotkeys for it. Or if you look over here at the icon for MultiCut, if you look at the poly modeling shelf, over here on the right, there's that symbol. That's the MultiCut tool as well. There are two other places to find it, which I'll show you in just a second, but let me start by actually using the MultiCut tool. If I select it, what this allows me to do is actually cut into the geometry and add additional vertices and edges. So if I left click on an edge and I left click on another edge and I hit the enter key to close that, you see that that becomes an edge. So it's got the two vertices as well as the edge. Now here's the third way to access the MultiCut tool. After I've used a tool, as I've spoken about previously, it then becomes available as the last tool used. In order to access that quickly, I can hit the Y key, use the tool, hit enter, hit the Y key, use the tool, hit enter. I don't necessarily need to keep hitting the Y key. That's just if I've selected something else. So for example, if I go in and move it and it changes to a different tool, in order to access it again, I can hit the Y key. But honestly, as long as it's active, I can continue to use it over and over again simply by clicking and hitting enter, clicking and hitting enter. And there I'm cutting into my geometry and creating new forms that can then be adjusted and used. So you see that moves around. And I'm going to step back. Now the final place to find it is in the modeling toolkit. So if I come over here to the top right and I select this icon that's on the far left, this is the modeling toolkit, I can pull that up, and if I come down to the bottom under tools, there's the MultiCut tool again. So I can select it there, and once again I can use it and start creating with it. So I will Control Z to undo that. Now I want to show you another thing that you can do with it. For one, the MultiCut tool can cut across multiple edges and forms. So if I left click here and I left click here, it will calculate how to cut across this extra edge. And you see that's marked in orange now instead of blue. And so I can hit enter, and there I've cut in the geometry. I will Control Z to undo that again. Once again, if you're on a Mac and you need to undo, it's Control Z or Command Z to undo. But there's another option. So if I want to be more accurate with the way I cut, I can use something called Snap Step. Now, when I hold down the left mouse key, so not just clicking, but holding down the left mouse key and dragging, you can see that it tells me where on this edge I will be dropping this vertices. So anywhere between 0 and 100. And that was at 63.5. So you see how that works. So undoing that action again. But here, underneath the MultiCut in the modeling toolkit, there's the MultiCut options, and it shows Snap Step. Now I can set this to any variable that I want between 0 and 100. So if I snap step at 10%, what that means is when I hold down and I hold the the shift key, so holding down the left mouse button while holding down the shift key, it will bring up my snap step. If I don't hold down the shift key, I can just freely click anywhere on the line. But if I want to snap step, I hold down shift and hold down the left mouse key and drag, and I can do it at 10% increments. So I can do it anywhere along here, and when I let go, that's where it'll go to. So I will undo that. So I can even take it up all the way to the top, or I can do it at a partial percentage, like 50%. If I hold down the shift key, I can click and then click the next one, and I know that that is going to be right in the middle every time. So as I come and I continue to click, I can continue to make a line all the way around. So I've just made a complete edge loop all the way through the center of the form, and I know it's exactly in the center and right on that grid line because I was snapping it to exactly 50%, so exactly halfway between these two lines. Hit enter, and that will close, and so I've got that shape now. Another great thing about the MultiCut tool is that instead of just cutting single sections, I can actually do complete edge loops. So with that snap step on at 50%, I can hold down the Shift key as well as the Control key in order to do an edge loop. Now I don't need to snap step if I don't want to. I can just hold down the Control key and you see there's a complete edge loop, and so when I left click, there you go, that's got that edge loop in there. And it works very well for me. And so what I could do, well, first of all, I'm going to undo that because I'm just wanting to be subdivided in two directions across the center. But what I can do is start cutting things in that way. And if your topology is done well, that will work through the form. Now, this is something I want to bring up right now. You need to work in quads. There will be a time and a place in the future where you'll probably want to use triangles for specific purposes, but for clean modeling practices and to get used to good topology, I want you for right now to try just to work in quads. Now what a quad is it's a four-sided face. I'm going to go in a little bit and talk about n-gons, which are faces, polygon faces with 5 or more sides, and those need to be avoided. But equally, there are a lot of circumstances where you don't want triangles, which are 3-sided faces. So if I have a triangle right here, and I come in to drop in an edge loop because I want to add more information, like in here, see how I could drop that in very easily in that section. If I go to edge and double left click on an edge and shift double left click on the next edge, I can actually scale those up. And you see it's very easy for me to change the form. If I come here to this side and I try and drop in an edge loop, I have a problem because it didn't connect across the top. It didn't know where to go. The edge loop relies on there being 4 sides and it knows to go across the opposing side. Here, where there's only 3 sides, it doesn't know what to do. And it can create even larger problems when I try and add in another edge loop, like right here. And now that that was 4 sides with 1, 2, 3, 4 sides across here, so similar to like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, it ends up causing issues where it is trying to figure out what to do and it starts cutting across at funny angles to create those edge loops. If I try and create the edge loop here, now that's 4-sided, it jumps over to there, and you see it's not as clean and as easy to create geometry. And so for right now, especially as you're beginning, avoid triangles. Avoid anything with 3 sides, and also avoid anything with more than 4 sides. Work strictly in quads because that's going to help increase your workflow and your ability. There's 2 other things I want to point out very quickly with this cut tool. The first is that as I have it selected, you see that as I'm moving it around, it's got kind of like this magnetization to a vertice, whichever one's closest as I'm dragging this around. Now, this is useful because it allows you to know where you're closest to, but it can actually create some problems. So for example, if I click there thinking, oh, well, it's got that corner selected, click, and then I click on this corner and I hit enter, I'm good, I got the line. But I really don't. What it was doing was it was attaching to that corner in order to create that vertice right here. And so with that vertice there, it's actually going to create other issues. I want there to just be the edge in between these 2 vertices. So I'm going to actually delete that. But the other thing that it's doing is it's bringing up a point that you need to know about, and that's that you can't have floating vertices and edges on an object. That creates something called a floating face, which I'll cover in later videos, but I just want you to be aware of it. So if I click here and hit enter, it's not going to let me. I need to connect somewhere. So I click there and hit enter, and now it's not floating anymore. It's actually got some kind of connection in. So you want to be careful so you don't get left with those floating portions. All right, the other thing I want to point out is that you can use this and do a lot of fun creative stuff. So for example, I can come here and start cutting in and creating all sorts of fun shapes, and then connect that to a corner and hit enter. And this could be really cool. So for example, I can grab these 2 faces and do an extrusion to get this nice fun custom form. But the problem is, once again, this is creating something called n-gons, and that's going to be an issue. This is a polygon with way more than 4 faces, or 4 sides to the face. This is another polygon with more than 4 sides to the face. These are both now polygons with more than 4 sides to the face. So while this is fun, it only really works if you actually get your edge loops through the form to maintain the quads. So I'm going to step back and undo that, but I just want to make you aware that that is something that the MultiCut tool can be used for. Another thing I want to point out very quickly is up until now you've been having to go to vertex or edge or face individually to be able to grab and do anything. Well, within the modeling toolkit, you can actually select multi-component and very quickly jump around to vertex, edge. I haven't had a lot of success with the face selection on this. It's mainly sticking to vertex and edge, but it is there, and I just want to make you aware of it. So if you want to play around with that rather than manually switching between them by holding down the right mouse key, it's something else to do. It might improve or increase your workflow. But for right now, play around with the MultiCut tool. Just get used to it. So once again, you can select the MultiCut tool from a lot of different locations. You can just click one part, click another, and you can keep clicking if you want and eventually hit enter to close that, and then you can do it again. But you can also create edge loops, once again, by holding down the control key and then left clicking. You can snap step by defining how big of a step you want it to be. So I can do that at 25%. And holding down the shift key and the left mouse key, you can drag to where you want it to snap to and let go. And you can do it that way. And then you can also do edge loops by holding down the control key and combinations of that. So I think I may have already mentioned the edge loops, but there it is again. But play around with it and get used to the tool and have fun.